personal mastery. That is, personal vision. Over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a steady growth in interest in businesses in the subject of vision. About 15 years ago, we began a 3-day leadership program through Innovation Associates, in which we started working with the concept of vision and organizational vision and all the elements which today we call the discipline personal mastery. Initially, this was greeted, I would say, with a bit of skepticism. You would see some wrinkled brows and some curious looks, and usually sometime within the first 15 or 20 minutes of some initial presentation on the importance of vision, some sober executive would say, "Do you guys come from California?" At that point in time, it was actually much easier to talk about vision because it was such a new idea. It was not part of the business jargon. Over this last 10 years or so, it has become part of the business jargon, and today if you ask any group of managers, how many of you have been involved in writing a mission statement or a vision statement in the last 5 years, about 90% of the hands go up. This is actually problematic. It actually makes it a little bit more difficult to get into the deeper territory underlying this whole domain of vision. While a lot of companies have worked hard to develop organizational visions, they've missed the necessary first starting point. The first starting point is that committees do not create visions. People create visions. The notion of vision is one of the oldest in the world. We even know the famous biblical entreaty in our Western Judaic Christian culture, where there is no vision, the people perish. What does this mean? I think what it means is that we have understood for a very long time that the quality of our lives is intimately related to the nature of our aspirations. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no spirit to create something new that we care deeply about, there is a part of us that dies. When I finished writing The Fifth Discipline, I was looking for a quote to go on the back jacket. Well, actually, I wasn't looking for it. The publishers were looking for it. I had never even thought about this. And I thought about it for a while, and I thought, gee, if there was one person in the world who I would like to get to offer a quote for the back jacket of the book, it would be Ed Deming. Dr. Deming is a world-famous character, recognized around the world as probably the single most influential person, or certainly the single best known person associated with the quality management revolution that has gradually swept around the world. And I've always admired him because of his interesting and remarkable mixture of intellectual depth and practical judgment. Dr. Deming did write a quote that went on the back jacket of The Fifth Discipline when it was first published, and the first sentence in the quote was, "Our prevailing system of management has destroyed our people." Where there is no vision, the people perish. What Dr. Deming was talking about was the same thing that biblical entreaty talks about. That when we destroy people's capacity to hold a dream and to orient themselves around a dream, there is a part of us that dies. Over the years that we've been working with this concept of vision, I've come to a belief that vision is not particularly unique to any person. There aren't some people who have visions and others that don't. Vision isn't particularly mystical or magical. Vision is simply an answer to the question, what do I truly want? What is it that really matters to me? What is it that I would truly like to be part of creating? Robert Frost once said, "All great things are created for their own sake." In our society, we've bought into a pernicious notion that people only do something if there's something in it for them. People actually struggle a lot with the concept of vision because of this notion. They think that, well, if my vision is to become the boss, it must be because I want more money. Or if my vision is to have a good work team, it must be so that I'll be happier. It may be that that's simply my vision because it's my vision. Young children are usually pretty unconflicted about this. I've rarely found a very young child, if you ask the question, what do you want? They don't have a very quick answer. The problem is, as we grow up, we start to realize that a lot of our immediate, spontaneous, natural, and genuine answers are a little bit in conflict. You know, somebody says, oh, well, you can't have that because if you had that, your brother wouldn't be able to have what he wants. Or someone with the best of intentions, perhaps, tells us, well, that's very nice, but you really have to be realistic. Recently, there was a meeting at the United Nations, and a good friend of mine came who has worked for many, many years in government, and at that time part of the transition team for the Clinton administration. And she told quite a lovely story. I think it touched people very deeply. She said, when I was a young child, I had the dream that I would live in a world of harmony. And as I grew up, everybody kept telling me, well, that's very lovely, but you really need to focus on something realistic. And so I did. And I spent most of my life focusing on very realistic and practical things. But I couldn't make this dream go away. I kept thinking, gee, what I really care about is people being able to live together in harmony. Now, harmony to her did not mean everybody's the same. It did not mean an absence of conflict. In fact, if you think about what harmony literally means, if you think of harmony in a musical quartet, harmony comes from diversity. Harmony presumes diversity. Without diversity, there can be no harmony. So actually, harmony comes from different people being themselves and somehow being in harmony. This is exactly what it meant to her. So she told this little story. She said, you know, I realized I've gotten to a point in my life where I still haven't given up the dream. And you know, I now think I won't give up the dream. I think that is what my life is about. My life is about harmony. And I'll continue to work for as long as I can to bring about harmony. The domain of personal mastery starts with appreciating what personal vision is all about. In all of our efforts in organizations to build shared vision, we've missed the starting point. 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, we've missed the place that all of this work has to start. Organizations will not have visions until individuals have visions. And organizations will not be able to build shared visions until they create a climate in which each and every human being can start to live with the question, what is it that I truly want to create in my life? Vision is not a solution to a problem. A vision is not something we need in order to feel okay. It's not the same as a goal, that if we got it, we'd feel good about ourselves. A vision is actually something that we truly want, as Robert Frost said, for its own sake. Pursuing a vision is not easy. It's not particularly comfortable. It's not stress-free. Living one's life around a sense of vision can be very painful. It certainly can lead you to take a long time doing things that otherwise you might have thought, well, I could have gotten here a lot quicker if I just cut a few corners. So why would you do it? You would do it because you cared enough about it. I found over the years that as people start to think about this shift from focusing on goals, realistic goals like we've been taught since we were kids to focus on, to actually focus on our genuine visions, that one of the things that's often very helpful for them is to look in domains of their life where they do operate with a vision. When you ask people, what is one area of your life in which you really are focused on something for its own sake, not for what it will bring you, simply because you care so much about it that your energies naturally flow into its support and into bringing it into reality. It's very interesting that there's one domain in which many, many people immediately identify. And of course, that's the domain of being a parent. I think one of the few places in our lives where we actually operate in a truly visionary orientation at some fundamental level is with regard to our children. Anybody who thinks they have children in order to make themselves feel good is in for a rude awakening. Having children is a lifelong process of, as the Buddhists would say, suffering. Now, when the Buddhists say suffering, they don't mean pain and anguish only. They mean life in its full, rich tapestry of varied emotions and times when things aren't going so well and other times when they're going wonderfully. But that whole flow of different states of feeling. And you do it despite that. You don't do it in order to feel a certain way. You do it simply because you care. Artists understand the visionary orientation because it's actually the only way that great art has ever been created. If the artist doesn't truly care about the result they're creating, they cannot operate in a creative orientation. And in a sense, in talking about the discipline of personal mastery, we're basically asking ourselves, what would keep us from operating in more and more domains of our life with this same orientation? That first and foremost, the bedrock of what draws us into action is that we deeply care. And that becomes the context for everything we do. It's not that problems won't come. Of course problems will come. Raising children is nothing but a series of problems in many ways. But there's a larger context. There's a reason why we're doing it. When we forget that reason, we get caught up in a ceaseless treadmill of problem solving. And the irony of that is the best we ever get is the absence of problems. Where in fact, when we have that richer context in mind, we realize that yes, there is a reason we're doing all this. We're doing it because there's something we want to bring into being, which we deeply care about. We've often said that all visions come from within. What I mean by that is, again, very simple. They come from pondering a question. And the question is a very basic one. What is it that I truly want? What is it that I deeply care about? What is it that I would like my life to be dedicated to? Some visions might last a lifetime. Other visions might last for a month or a year. But they have that same spirit of deep caring. Now, I said that personal vision is an entree point, a way into the domain of personal mastery. But it's not all of the domain. If one is creating any work of art, imagine we're creating a painting or a sculpture. There's actually two fundamental dynamics that have to harmonize. The first is the dynamic of vision. I think Picasso once said it beautifully when he said, if you could trace the evolution of any great work of art, not as a series of snapshots, but in terms of the inner state of the artist, the critical moment comes when the artist sees the vision.